Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. Here to do a review of the new movie 2025 Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler, directed by Mark Webb. Hmm. Okay, just saw this film. This film, is it as bad as people say it is? Is it one of the worst disasters to ever happen to Disney? Well, it is a huge flop. It did lose, at least what's going on. It did lose Disney a lot of money. But what did I think of it? Well, but I'm not. I thought it was decent. I give it a C minus. I take points away because, well, let's just go quickly through the plot. It it's a movie about a princess who lost her parents in a tragedy. Right? They were both killed. Where she first lost her mother, and then her father was murdered by her stepmother, played by Gal Gadot. Then the stepmother becomes jealous and she wants to kill Snow White because she wants to rule the land. And that's one of the biggest differences in the original 1937 version and the new version. In the original 1937 version, the queen doesn't want to rule the land. She's just jealous of Snow White because Snow White is prettier. That's the whole purpose of it. That's why she wants to kill Snow White. This one brings politics into it because when Snow White's father was ruling the land, he was like democratic, right? He was like his rule was like a constitutional monarchy versus um the queen's rule, which is more of a dictatorship, right? So Snow White wants to restore that. She wants to restore rule of the people versus rule of the aristocracy. She wants to distribute the wealth, as it were. She wants to institute democracy in her land, and the queen doesn't want that. In the 1937 version, there's no mention of that. You know what I mean? There's no mention of any of that. No politics whatsoever in that one. So, that's one of the major differences. Another major difference is in the original, the prince, he doesn't have a name, right? He has no name. He's just the prince, right? In this one, spoiler alert, his name is Jonathan, and he's a thief that he originally comes to steal from the queen, and Snow White and him fall in love. So a lot of people are saying that's one of the the things they hate, but to me, I feel like that's one of the things I liked because one of the original criticism that the original Snow White had was that she just meets him, she falls in love, and boom, they live happily ever after, like most Disney movies, right? But this one at least gives it a motivation. She sympathizes with him, and she falls in love with him for a reason, right? It at least fleshes out their romance. Disney doesn't, since Enchanted mocked this concept when they came out with their movie years ago, Disney doesn't really do this anymore, but they used to do this all the time. Most of their romances were never fleshed out. You know, a guy and a girl just met each other and boom, all of a sudden instant chemistry and the guy and the girl fall in love. That doesn't happen here. Here, they're at least given some time to flesh out their romance. And here's another big difference. Another big difference, and I'm just going to go through some of the differences, rather than going through plot by plot, scene by scene, because most people know the story of Snow White. Um, Here, when she's taken to the Seven Dwarfs' house by the animals, she immediately falls asleep, where she doesn't immediately fall asleep in the 1937 version. The 1937 version, she and the animals clean the house before the dwarfs get there, so that the dwarfs would know that there's something different about them. Here, she just falls asleep and her and the dwarfs clean the house. So that's another big difference, another small difference. Also, in this one, they're not called the dwarfs, right? Because they're not actual dwarfs. You know what I mean? Which is one of the things that people, especially Peter Dinklage, the star of Game of Thrones, had a huge problem with when it came to this. He felt like it was politically incorrect, and then a lot of the little people community, especially Hornswoggle, criticized them because hey, this was one of the few roles that little people were qualified for, and this was, the making of this movie was going to put a lot of, um, little people actors, in prominent roles. So you're actually taking money out of their pockets and taking their livelihood away with your politically correct BS. So so they went with Dinklage's image, and these are regular sized people, in this version, which is this is fucked up. So that's another huge difference. Another big difference is the Queen and Snow White actually know each other, whereas in the 1937 version, they didn't really know each other all that well. Like even though they were stepdaughter and stepmother, they really didn't know each other all that much. So that's another big difference, which I thought was, again, I thought this version fleshed it out a little bit more um, than the other one. The other one just kind of breezed through the story, like, taking for granted that a lot of people knew it. And now we're getting right, exactly, Lise. It really was fucked up what Peter Dinklage did. Sometimes Democratic and liberal minded people, they mean well. We mean well. I'm a Democrat myself, a liberal, and we do things because we don't want to offend people sometimes. You know what I mean? But sometimes out of our good intention, we end up hurting the particular minority that or marginalized group that we want to help, you know, with this kind of stuff. Now we get to the biggest controversy. And the biggest controversy with this is the fact that Snow White is not white. you know? They picked Rachel Zegler, a Colombian woman. I mean, she is a light-skinned Latina. She is fairly light-skinned, but she is still a person of color, which is different, for a movie called Snow White. The name was in the 1812 book, which the 1937 movie is based on. And they say this in the original. They don't say this in this version. The reason why Snow White is called Snow White in the original and in the book is because her skin is white as snow and her hair is black and her lips are red. This is why she's called Snow White. But in the interest of modernizing the movie, they sought to cast somebody, a Hispanic woman, which, of course, me being Hispanic, I don't have necessarily a problem with, but they have to explain this, and they do explain it. The way it's explained in this movie of why her name is Snow White is because she was born in a snowstorm. The snowstorm where her mother originally passed away, and she was born right after. So she's called Snow White because she was born in a snowstorm. In this version, not like in the original where she's Snow White because she's, well, white. Lisa says there's no white person. I mean, hell, but we'll get to that. I agree with Lisa to an extent, but there is a girl that because of course conservatives were upset about this movie when they was first talking about it, because not only liberals raised a stink because of the dwarfs thing, conservatives raised a stink because she wasn't white, right? So being as that was, Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro decided that before Disney came out with their version, he was going to come out with his version of Snow White. Going to tell the exact same story, but with his own people on a much lower budget, of course, because he's the Daily Wire and they're Disney. So he had a girl, Brett Cooper, the famous YouTuber, comment section with Brett Cooper. And this girl, while not white as snow, like Lisa's saying, she did look a lot closer to what the cartoon drawing of Snow White was from the original movie. But of course, her and Ben Shapiro had a falling out. The movie never got made, and we never got to see what that would look like. You know, their conservative version. So we only got this version. But that girl's a lot closer. I've seen other actresses, you know, that they're a lot closer. Snow the product, even though she's Hispanic too, she's a Hispanic origin, she looks a lot closer to what people imagine Snow White to look like. Not only was this girl of a different ethnicity, she didn't look like the original Snow White, the drawing. You know what I mean? Which it didn't bother me. You know what I mean? Because I'm not attached to it. But I'm just saying that's one of the criticisms against it. And another big criticism coming from a political standpoint as well is that there's a song, and this was the first ever Disney song ever. Because keep in mind, Snow White was the first ever Disney movie. So the first ever Disney song in the first ever Disney movie was the titular song for Snow White, and that is "Someday My Prince Will Come." The song is not there. The song was removed from the movie. "Someday My Prince Will Come," the song that everybody associates with Snow White, is no longer in this version of the movie. Because, yeah, shocking, right, Lisa? Because they wanted to present her as a feminist. They wanted to present her that she didn't need no man. You know, she gets a man, but in her own terms. Like she hooks up with him. He does the thing where he saves her, right? She takes the poison apple and all that. But the point is, she's not wishing, she's not waiting for him. She's doing her thing on her own as an independent woman. And, you know, and then that happens, and then she meets him, and then he saves her, right? But she's not wishing and waiting for him. That's one of the things that Rachel Zegler herself had input in to change. She wanted that changed, and they did that for her. She felt like the song was too old-fashioned for her. So the song is not there. So, I mean, those are the major differences. Now, what did I think of it? It was decent. You know what I mean? Like I said, C minus. I think there's too much politics in this movie. You know what I mean? I think that, and you see the slash of the other topic of this video. Why are the Disney movies failing? And this is more inspired by Lisa because she posted this on her Facebook page, and this was basically her topic. Why are these movies failing? I think one of the reasons why these movies are failing is there's too much politics in a lot of these films. There's too much of like, Disney is a very liberal company, right? And they're trying to push this agenda of feminism, of racial inclusion, of LGBT inclusion, which of disabled, anti-ableism sentiment, right? They're trying to push this inclusion, this message, and and I'm not against it. I'm for it, but create new stories where that is reflected. Don't take the old stories and mess with them and try to make them that. You know what I mean? Those stories are a product of their time. They come from their time. Leave them alone. You know what I mean? Let them do their thing. Don't try to mess with what's already successful. See, they don't want to come up with new stories. They want to use the old stories because the old stories make money, but they want to create them in a new way. They want to put a new spin on them. And that's not cool. You know what I'm saying? It's not just Disney, it's all of Hollywood, but because Disney it messages to children that, and sometimes, right, exactly. We come up with new ideas. Disney comes out with stuff for children, and because it comes out for stuff for children, children are easily influenced, and I don't think it's appropriate to really push some of this political stuff onto kids. You know, and like I said, if you're gonna do it, come up with new stories. Don't take the old stories. Like you're talking about a movie from 1937 that was written in 1812 and trying to make it into something modern for the 21st century with feminism. You know what I mean? Like if there is a story in all of Disney's canon that is the most unfeminist story that there could be in all of Disney's canon, it's this one. This one is not feminist at all. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing feminist about Snow White. There's nothing political about Snow White. There's nothing like Snow White was not a warrior woman. She was not she was not a fighter. She was not Joan of Arc. She was not any of these strong female characters. She was Snow White. Like the whole point of Snow White is that she sits around and she waits for her prince to come, right? And then she forms friendships with these dwarfs. And yes, they were dwarfs. They were little people. They weren't, weirdly shaped human beings. So trying to make it more politically correct is what really messed this up. You know what I mean? And which let me give it a really low grade. Like Disney thinks because the idea of yeah, exactly. We said that like the movie Soul that came out in 2020, and it was an original story, and it had a good message behind it. It was something a remake. The problem is when you mess with these original stories, it messes with people's childhoods. We talked about last night when we did the Star Wars review that they started with Star Wars. Star Wars was the first one that Disney started to really mess with and started to like, okay, well, how can we take this classic franchise that people love and put, new politics into it, put female empowerment, put a racial agenda in it, put an LGBT agenda, put a political agenda. And yes, Snow White has a political agenda. The queen is a dictator, and Snow White is trying to overthrow her. Who's that remind you of? You know what I'm saying? Who in the real world is people that Democrats say is a dictator that they're trying to overthrow, that is only doing stuff for the rich? Who in possibility can that remind anybody of? I don't know. Maybe his first name starts with D and ends with T. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So, like, but Snow White doesn't do that. You know what I'm saying? She's not political. There's nothing that you could look at in the original Snow White and say that there's anything political in that movie. There's nothing political at all. It's a completely apolitical movie that was made for children, small little girls that just want to dress up and be princesses. That's who this movie is made for. Little 8, 9, 10-year-old girls that they want to dress up in pretty dresses and someday dream about getting married. They don't care about politics. They don't care about social inequality. They don't care about racism. They don't care about any of that. They're little 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 7-year-old girls. That's all they want to do. That's what this movie is made for. And trying to make it something that it isn't is wrong. You know what I'm saying? You're taking something so simple and trying to make it complex because you're against Republicans, which I'm against them too, but create news stories for that. Don't take something new and try to impose something old and try to impose something new on it. Like I said, Star Wars was the first they tried to do that with. Then they started doing with all their movies. They say, oh, it worked there, which it really didn't. It did not work because when they did it, people rejected it, just like they are with these. You know, so. But yeah, Lisa's absolutely right. You could take a movie and make a new movie and create a message with that. But even in Soul, there was nothing political about Soul. It was a personal journey of a man struggling with his life. He had not achieved what he wanted to achieve, but he was like a kind of a workaholic, and he had to learn to realize what the true meaning of life and to enjoy the little things in life after he died. You know what I'm saying? And came back to life. There's nothing political about Inside Out. You know what I mean? It's not when they get to these main action movies, these main live action movies, that they start to become really political. They start to, okay, how can we put socialism in here? How can we Bernie Sanders it up? How can we turn Snow White into AOC? Basically, and that's not cool. You know what I'm saying? That's not cool because number one, besides like kids being impressionable, people say, oh, kids are impressionable. I don't really think so. In a way I do, but in a way I don't, because like kids are gonna adopt their parents' politics. If they come from a conservative household, they'll probably adopt conservative politics, maybe, at least until they're teenagers, and vice versa with liberal politics. But really, it makes the movie boring, and kids don't really care anyway. They don't really make the connection. Okay, the queen is Trump and Snow White is like a progressive. They don't in their minds, they don't make that connection because they don't care about politics. 7-8-year-old. You think a 7-8-year-old little girl is watching is watching C-SPAN or CNN? She doesn't care about that. And if she does, she's not getting her political messaging from a Disney Snow White movie, that's for sure. You know what I'm saying? People look to movies like this, fantasy movies, for escapism. They don't look to these kind of movies to tell them what to believe about social issues. This is not the kind of movie for that. So trying to make it that is kind of stupid. And I think that's why these movies are failing. Because people are starting to see, wait a minute, like Disney has produced 23 live action, and of the 23, let's talk about it. It originally started with The Jungle Book, I think way back in let me see when The Jungle Book came out. 2016. 2016, I was going to say 15, but 2016, The Jungle Book came out. That was pretty good. Then they came out with Aladdin, right? Just the new wave. And then they came out with The Lion King. They failed with The Lion King. And let's talk about Mufasa. Why did that fail? That's another one that failed at the box office. Even though I liked it, it failed. Why did that fail? Well, that one had nothing to do with politics. That one had to do with Beyonce Knowles. The fact that people people perceived it as Disney trying to force Beyonce's character onto us in the 2019 version, but also in Mufasa. Less in Mufasa, more in the 2019 version, but this time in the in the in the Mufasa, the 2025 movie, 2024 movie, they had the daughter, Blue Ivy as Kiara, and she did a pretty good job, but people felt like, okay, this is coming out conveniently after Jay-Z had his scandal, which is something that Lisa brought up. It seemed like it was a way to cover the tracks for Jay-Z. You know what I mean? So that could have been a reason why that failed. Plus, people didn't like the 2019 version, so they're like, okay, this is more of the same, so they didn't go see it. Sonic 3 beat him out this week. So Pixar does a much better job coming out with movies and with messaging in movies that everybody can relate to. See, because when you tie your movies to politics and you tie them to a specific political agenda, because even though Mufasa is not necessarily political, there is certain things that are in it that are kind of political-ish too. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, the fact that Mufasa is better with women because he was raised around women. So it's like, okay, women want a sensitive guy, right? So it's like, okay, it's attacking toxic masculinity, as it were. Or the fact that they talk about Scar's maybe homosexuality in the movie, which is not touched on in the original. Which, I mean, they don't hint at it explicitly. They don't mention it explicitly, but they hint at it. So again, Pixar does a good job at delivering messages without um uh yeah, Lisa's saying the first live action one was 101 Dalmatians. Oh yeah, okay, but I'm talking about the modern live action ones though. Because for a while they didn't do the live action ones. They just started doing this current trend of live action remakes of their original Renaissance classic, the Renaissance period classics. Even though Jungle Book is not a Renaissance movie, it was still loved by the 90s generation because it came out on home video, and that's when it became really popular. Because people don't know this, but the original Jungle Book was a flop in the box office in 1966 when it came out because Disney was going through a lot of changes at that time because that's when Walt Disney died. You know, that was his last movie, and it didn't really do well. It started to do well, and it became really a classic in Disney's canon. Yeah, the CGI Jungle Book was great. That's what I'm saying. When they started off, they were good. So they got the message like, okay, this is what people want. But then they started to go overboard. But people started to like the Jungle Book on video, the cartoon version, the animated version on video, our generation, the kids that were born in the 80s and grew up in the 90s, right? Millennials, you know, late Gen Xers and early millennials like us. So we were into the Disney movies already because of the Renaissance period. We were living in the Renaissance period. What's the Renaissance period? And I'm mentioning it, and people are like, well, what is that? Well, according to Disney, it is the time between 1989 and like 2000 that Disney released all their classic movies like Aladdin, like Lion King, like Little Mermaid, like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Tarzan, Hercules. It is the period when Disney animation came back. It if you compare it to wrestling, it's like Disney's version of the Attitude Era. You know what I mean? Disney came back because for a long time, okay, Disney's history, this is off the topic in a way, but Disney's history is from 1937, which is Snow White is the first Disney movie ever, till about 1966 with The Jungle Book. Disney was on a roll. Disney was such on a roll that in the 1930s, Walt Disney Studios became the only studio to generate money during the Great Depression. You know, other studios were losing money. Walt Disney wasn't losing money. He was still rich during the Great Depression. You know what I mean? Because he was making history basically. So that was the first era of Disney dominance. Then after he died, the entire 70s, Walt Disney Animation Studio almost shut down. That's how bad they were doing. You know, that's when they released movies like The Fox and the Hound and movies like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. No, not the King Arthur, right? That King Arthur movie, or Robin Hood with the animals, right? Which a lot of people didn't like. That was the 70s, or The Black Cauldron, which is considered their worst movie ever. During that time, they suffered a lot. And it wasn't until 1989 that they released The Little Mermaid and things started to turn around for them again until 2000. Then by 2000, from 2000 to 2013, Disney suffered again another down period. And then in 2013, they came out with Frozen, and that's when they had new management. Michael Eisner wasn't there anymore. Bob Iger was there, and that's when they started to start this new trend, and they became bigger than ever. But I think that's starting to subside. So you have 1923 to 1937. From that period, Disney was only releasing shorts. 1923 to 37, that was when Disney came out with, they invented their main characters, Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy. Those were only the shorts. Then from 37 to 66, those were the full-length feature films of the first Disney boom. Then from 1989, from 89 to 2000, that was the second boom. And then from 2013 to now, that's the third boom in Disney's history. Disney's been around for 100 years. So each time they've had ups and downs, but I think a lot of people got mad because people from my generation grew up with the Renaissance movies, and they love those Renaissance movies. You know, we watched them over and over. How many times we watched Aladdin? How many times we watched The Lion King, which is the most successful Disney movie of all time, that came out in 1994. We love that movie. You know what I mean? So, you know, we didn't want to see those movies messed with, but Disney felt. Bob Iger is one of the worst managers in all of Disney. Because people might say, oh, well, it's under him that a lot of the boom period came back after Frozen. Yeah, but he's the one that he basically said in his book he didn't want them to come out with any original stories. He just wanted to buy other IPs. He wanted them to buy Pixar. He wanted them to buy Marvel. He wanted them to buy Star Wars. He wanted them to buy 20th Century Fox. Yes, Lisa saying Dumbo, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, Wendy, Mulan, Christopher Robin, and Lady and the Tramp. Well, like they didn't, because these were Disney remakes of their classic IPs. Because Bob Iger felt like he didn't want to create anything new. He wanted to recycle the old. That was his philosophy. And because he felt that way, he ended up just messing up all of the franchises all of the movies that we really loved, man, and other franchises that weren't Disney's main brand, but that we loved too. Out of every group that belongs to the Disney family, you have the Disney main group, which is their movies, right? Then you have Pixar, then you have Star Wars, then you have Marvel, then you have 20th Century Fox. Out of all of them, the only one that still people love and people look forward to seeing is Pixar. That's it. The Disney main movies, people know they're going to be flops. People know they're going to be filled with political messaging that people don't care about. So they don't care about that. Star Wars is a dead brand because of Disney. Marvel is still good in a sense, but the people are tired of these superhero movies, so they're putting that to the side. 20th Century Fox, they've done nothing with it. They've done zero with that. I don't even know why they bought that. They were in a bidding war in 2019 with Comcast over that. They eventually acquired the rights to it. And they've done nothing with it. They sat on it. You know, they could have tried to revive The Simpsons in some way with better animation, or Family Guy in some way with better animation, but they didn't do that though. And then you got, of course, and these are just the animation department. Of course, you got ESPN belongs to them, and ABC also belongs to them, but that's something different. You know what I mean? Uh, they brought back American Idol, I guess. I guess you could say that's one thing, good thing Disney did. But as far as like their main movies, their main brand, nah, they haven't done anything good. Like you said, they were all complete bombs in the box office. All these ones she listed. Dumbo, Dumbo is a very important movie in Disney history because it's the first movie made after World War II. Because Walt Disney kind of did take a break in World War II because he helped with the war effort. He made propaganda films for the United States during the war effort. That was between 1941 to 1945. There's a lot of those Disney war propaganda movies where Donald Duck plays Hitler in one of them. You know what I mean? Like he plays the villain of Hitler. But when the war was over, Dumbo was the first one that they made that was not a war picture. Peter Pan, a classic film that Disney struggled to get the rights to at first. Lady and the Tramp, I love that movie, and the live action didn't do good with that either. So of all the CGI remakes, I say Aladdin and The Jungle Book were probably the only two that were really good. You know, so they really need to stop this. They really need to rethink their strategy because they're losing money hand over fist with these movies. These movies are bombing at the box office. Nobody cares about them. They upset people. They ignite political debates that are unnecessary. And overall they suck. You know what I mean? And that's the most important part of going to a movie is that you want to be entertained, you want to enjoy it. You don't want to be lectured to. You don't want to be preached to. You know what I'm saying? Like, why do you think people don't like Christian movies? People don't like Christian movies because, yeah, they might believe in Christianity, they might be Christian, but they don't want to be lectured to in a movie. You know what I'm saying? So Democrats and liberals should take that advice as well. You might believe in the democratic philosophy and liberalism, the political philosophy, but you don't want to necessarily have it lectured to you in a Disney movie, now do you? You know, because then it's not a movie, it's propaganda. Oh, okay, they're coming out with more Disney movies: Tangled, Bambi, The Aristocrats, Robin Hood, Hercules, Moana, Lilo and Stitch, uh, and Lilo and Stitch is coming out this year. Okay, Moana is with The Rock, and I don't know. I like the first one, but that's not necessarily a classic one. So maybe that they didn't get away with doing that because that one just came out what in 2016. You know what I mean? So people are not really attached to that necessarily. Lilo and Stitch, it does nothing for me. Hercules, maybe they can make that one better because that was one of the ones I didn't like from the classic Renaissance period of Disney. Um, Aristocrats, Aristocats. Eh, maybe they can make that one better. Bambi, I don't know how are they gonna fuck that up? That's what I want to know. Because Bambi's animation was some of the most beautiful animation ever. Oh, at least since you saw this trailer for Lilo and Stitch. Really? Okay. See, I was never a fan. By then, well, let me see when Lilo and Stitch came out. Okay, uh, definitely by then I'd outgrown Disney. 2002, I was in I was in 11th grade. I was I wasn't watching Disney movies, so I actually didn't see it until I was much older. So, um, I'm talking about like the ones I consider classic: 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94. After 96, I was already 12. I'm going on 13. I like Hunchback of Notre Dame was the last one I saw in the theaters. This is you don't want to see Bambi because they're gonna show the killing of Bambi's mom or not. Millennials don't want to see that. Yeah, I agree. They don't. The killing of Bambi's mom was a rough one. Before Simba, Bambi's mom was the OG traumatization for kids. But Disney himself loved that movie because he was he really loved nature. And that was the point of it. He wanted to show that his love of nature in that movie. But when that movie first came out, there was kind of there was controversy with that movie as well because they thought that movie would anger hunters and would try to portray hunters, people that like to hunt, as bad people. They call them sportsmen at that time. So they were like, okay, this movie's going to try to portray us as bad people and try to get people to turn against us. you know? And Liz said justice for Bambi's mom. This one I could see that happening because again, Disney is much more liberal, and liberals are anti-hunting. Most of us live in blue states, big urban centers. We don't hunt. I mean that's more of a conservative thing. So I could see them making the hunter in the movie a much more like evil person. What I mean? Like demonizing him. So of course that's going to cause controversy when that comes out. But more so than it did, back when it first came out. When it first came out. Because it originally came out in 1932, guys. The original band, I mean 1942 rather. The original Bambi, 1942. One of the ones that Walt Disney loved but was considered a failure in the box office was Fantasia. He wanted to use Fantasia to introduce kids to classical music, but it never really caught on. It's a really boring movie, as a matter of fact, Fantasia. I every time I sat down to watch it, I fell asleep. Even the scene with the sorcerer's apprentice. My favorite Disney movie of all time, probably Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I hope they don't make a live action version of because I don't want to see them ruin it. You know, they're gonna start to. Mhm. At least since they're not gonna get Hunchback of Notre Dame. No, that I'm not. That was always one of my favorites. Like I said, that was the last Disney movie that I saw in theaters. Second favorite is The Lion King. Third favorite is Aladdin. I loved Aladdin because when it first came out, because it was the first Disney movie made for boys, with a boy as the main character. You know, Rescuers Down Under was a good one. Both versions, Rescuers Down Under. I mean, the Rescuers, the original, and then Rescuers Down Under, the sequel. But Rescuers Down Under, the sequel, didn't do so good, and that made Disney change course where they didn't want to release any more sequels. After that, all their sequels came out straight to video. After Rescuers Down Under came out. In 1990, Rescuers Down Under came out. So, but that's pretty much it, guys. C minus for Snow White. They haven't done Cinderella yet, but if they learned anything from Snow White, they won't do Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty in the same sort of way because basically Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White are basically like very similar. So yeah, definitely. Lisa said they won't do the Hunchback. She says they're not going to do the Hunchback of Notre Dame because they can't get little people to do the dwarfs. They're definitely not going to get somebody with a Hunchback to do that movie. Yeah, probably they'll skip it. Plus, oh, they did Cinderella already. Oh, see, I totally missed it. How did Cinderella do? See, they already did a live action Cinderella, and we reviewed it on this channel with Brandy and Whitney Houston. To me, that's the only live action Cinderella that should exist. But see how they made it where it was a diverse cast? It was a diverse cast, right? And nobody cared. You know what I mean? You had Brandy, a black role, a black fairy godmother, and Asian. No, I thought they did another one. Yeah, I knew about the Brandy one, of course. I thought they did another one though that was released in theaters. That one was made for TV. That was on ABC. Yeah. I know about that, of course. We have a review on this channel. And that review of that movie continues to get views to this day. That was like 4 or 5 years ago that we did that. You know, what I mean, people love that movie. That movie's considered a classic. But yeah, sometimes you can put a new spin on an old story, like they did with Wicked and The Wizard of Oz. But not with something like this. You know what I mean? Like not where you change the basic premise of the story. Oh, Cinderella 2015. No, I didn't even see that. See, they come out with so many of these live action versions. I don't even know what's what anymore. Any of this stuff. Anyway, I think they should just give the live action versions a break for at least a year, maybe two. Let them cool down for a while. Let people forget about all these controversies, or maybe wait till Trump is out of office and see. So, let it blow over. Yeah, see, but I don't know if they're going to do that though, because unless they get new management, Bob Iger doesn't want to. He doesn't want to make new movies. He's too scared that they might fail. But what's failing is the old. He wants to make new versions of old ones, and that's failing. So. Yeah, they said he needs to quit. I think so too. Well, they had Bob Chapek for a while, but he quit, and they brought Iger back. They think Iger is a success because he bought up other companies. He bought Pixar, he bought Star Wars, he bought Marvel. Yeah, he will eventually because he did with Star Wars. Look, his original plan with Star Wars was to release a Star Wars movie every year. And he was doing that he did that in 2016, and he did that in 2018 with the side movies. But once he figured out that failed, he changed his plan, and that's when they started releasing the shows on Disney Plus. They figure they're not going to lose as much money on Disney Plus as they are if they release it in theaters. Because like the Mandalorian, the movie with Baby Yoda, it was supposed to be a movie. It was supposed to be in theaters coming out in 2020, but because of the pandemic, as well as the failure of Solo and the failure in the box office of 2019's The Rise of Skywalker, they completely switched their model and they were like, okay, we're just going to do it on Disney Plus. But they wanted to do a thing on Disney Plus where, and they tried this with Mulan, where you had to pay for the subscription to have Disney Plus as well as pay for the movie too. An extra fee, kind of like they do with in on ESPN when UFC, because UFC has a deal with ESPN. So when UFC and Disney owns ESPN too, also. So when UFC has a pay per view, if you want to watch it, you got to end up paying double. You got to pay for the you got to pay for the subscription fee as well as the pay per view itself. So say the pay per view is like $60, you have to also pay, in addition to the $60, you have to pay for um, the subscription itself, which is like $10 or $20, right, or 15. Well, now they have the bundle with Hulu and ESPN Plus, so it's like $15, right, for them. So you end up paying twice, and that's a terrible model. That they tried that with Milan. They figured it works for UFC, so let's try it with our other, Disney Plus with our animated movies, and that ended up failing. People didn't. People weren't with that. People were like, I'm already buying the subscription. Why can't it be just like WWE Network, where with WWE Network, all you have to pay is $9 a month, and you could watch every single pay-per-view, all their added content, all their documentaries. Everything is included. You don't have to pay an extra fee to watch, say, WrestleMania or to watch the Royal Rumble. People wanted to be like that, but it wasn't. Disney tried to be slick with it, and it backfired on them. So, the best streaming model, and Disney should have copied their streaming model. The best streaming model, in my opinion, and it's not just because I'm a hardcore. They did it during the lockdown, but it wouldn't have worked anyway, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if they didn't do it during the lockdown, people are not going to pay a fee to have the streaming service and pay to watch the movie too. You pay your fee is the streaming service fee. Let me watch every movie on the streaming service fee, and then you'll recoup your money by adding more subscribers to the streaming service. Like I said, the best model out there is the WWE Network, because people don't pay for individual pay-per-views. People pay for the subscription fee. So being able to watch the pay-per-views is an incentive to get the streaming service. You're like, oh, I want to get the streaming service because I'll be able to watch every movie that comes out, or in WWE's case, every pay-per-view that comes out, just for $10. When WWE first proposed it in 2014, people said, the whole industry said, you'll lose tons of money. Like, that's a stupid idea. But it ended up working for the WWE. It ended up being very successful for them. And hopefully that never changes. Hopefully they keep the WWE Network, the way it is. In the U.S. anyway, because in the U.S. they partnered with Peacock. So hopefully that never changes. Hopefully they're together with the UFC now, so they might copy UFC / Disney's model and say, oh, we got to pay an extra fee. And if that happens, they'll lose subscribers too. People are not going to pay for a streaming service and then pay for extra content too. That's bullshit. For that, I'll buy the pay-per-view on TV, or I'll go to see the movie and say, fuck the streaming service. Because really the streaming services, Disney Plus and the WWE Network and all these other streaming services, they don't offer anything new except back catalog content, really. Especially Disney Plus and WWE, they're legacy companies. All Disney Plus offers is all their old movies that a lot of people already have on VHS or DVD or whatever. And the same thing with WWE Network, all their old pay-per-views and the Nitros and the Raws and stuff. You know what I mean? So that's the incentive for a hardcore fan to buy it. But for somebody that's a kid, they're not going to want to buy it for that because they don't care about the old content. People are not so much into classic content people, especially kids that are fans of these companies now, newer fans of these companies, kids, they care about the newer movies that come out. They don't care about the old, or the newer pay-per-views, the newer content. I care about it because I like to watch the old Renaissance movies, Disney movies and the Star Wars, the old Star Wars and stuff. You know what I mean? But and same thing with WWE Network. I like to watch the old WWE pay-per-view from when I was a kid, but kids these days don't care about that because they didn't live through it. Why do they care? They want to see the new stuff. And if that new stuff is not going to be available on the network on Disney Plus, why do I want that? You know what I'm saying? Just an extra bill that doesn't make sense, especially in this hard economic, times where we're basically going into a recession almost. But see, a lot of these companies look at the international market. They want to expand, especially Disney. Like Disney really cares about, especially the Chinese market. They really want to. They just opened up. They just opened up a Disneyland in Shanghai not so long ago, like 5 or 6 years ago. They opened up a Disneyland in China for the first time ever, and they really care about the Chinese market. And they thought that Mulan would really hit with Chinese consumers. But here's the thing: Chinese consumers, the Chinese people, they don't need Disney, an American company, telling them a warped, Americanized, westernized version of their own history that they already know. Like, how would it look if Japan came out with an anime about George Washington or an anime about Martin Luther King Jr.? That would look kind of stupid, right? We're Americans. We know our own history, or we should. Why do we need another country, another civilization to tell us about something about our culture? That's dumb. Thinking that you can reprocess their culture and then sell it back to them in a form of Mulan, something they probably know the Mulan story, the original Mulan story better than you. Why would you think that would be successful? Like, that was a racial miscalculation on Disney's part. They thought, oh, here we have a Chinese themed movie, it'll do well in China. It failed in China. You know what I mean? They're not going to go to an American company to watch a Chinese movie. They'll go to a Chinese filmmaking company, right? They want to go to American companies to watch American-themed movies, which are the movies that do well in China. You know what I mean? Like Avatar, Fast and the Furious is another example. Not Mulan. You know what I mean? Not Star Wars either. But that's still part of the reason why Star Wars failed in China is because during the time when Star Wars was blowing up around the world, China was communist and they weren't allowing Western movies. So Chinese kids didn't grow up with it. So they have no attachment to it like kids from, other countries do. Anyways, thanks for contributing. Thank you, everybody else, for contributing. This is an interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully it will be. Snow White is a huge landmark for them because, like I said, that was their first movie. That was the one when Disney was making that movie in '37. Everything was riding on that. If that movie failed, there would be no Walt Disney Company. He'd have went out of business. That was his WrestleMania. The same way they said about Vince McMahon with WrestleMania, he had all the cards writing on it. Disney was the same way in 37. If that failed, everything would have, the whole company would have went down the drain. You know what I mean? He did pretty good in 33 with Three Little Pigs, and in 28 with Steamboat Willie, the first uh, short starring Mickey Mouse. But if that failed, that would have been the end of him. You know what I mean? But it was a huge success. People loved it. And, you don't tinker with the classics, especially something that means so much in Disney history. And people that are hardcore Disney fans and hardcore Disney historians, because Disney's been around so long, it has its own historians, weren't going to like it. And they think girls like this girl power stuff, and sometimes women do like that, but sometimes women just want to be women. Like, women do want to be rescued by a prince. They do want that. They want to be, girls just want to be women sometimes. They don't always want to be warriors and fighters and feminists. Hollywood thinks they want that, but they don't always want that. What I mean? Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. I think that not only, I think that Lisa's were they're tired of it, and she's a female, so she's speaking from the female's perspective. I think there's a point where, just like over sexualization in hip hop, is people are getting tired of that, and people are moving on, trying to move on from that, and the over gangsterization of hip hop that we talk a lot about on this channel. People are trying to move away from that. I think it gets to a certain point where everything swings back. People do become more traditional. Gender roles are becoming a thing. Men are trying to be more traditional now. Women are trying to be more traditional. Not saying like we're turning the clock back to the 1950s. We're not going that far, but in our own modern way, people are looking for traditional gender roles again, men and women. So, there's a social conservatism on the rise in the United States anyway, and in the West more generally, that people are underestimating. And companies haven't really caught up. They will, though. When it starts to affect their pockets, see, one thing about America and one thing about communists, pardon me, the companies are communists, but one thing about capitalist countries, like America and the UK and all these capitalist countries, they want to make money. So if you vote with your pocketbooks and you don't watch them, they'll get the message and they'll say, okay, we got to change our direction because they're not making any money. That's their ultimate objective, to make money. If they're not making money, then they're failing. So if you don't go watch it and you don't see it, this is what I used to say to WWE fans. Star Wars fans got the message. Disney fans have apparently, mainline Disney fans have gotten the message now too. You don't watch, you're unhappy with the content they put out, don't watch it. Send a message to people and send a message to these companies that you don't like the direction that they're putting their movies in. You don't like their content. You do that with your dollar. You vote with your dollar. And that's how you decide the direction of these films. Just like you vote with your vote. Say you're in New York and you don't like Eric Adams or you don't like Kathy Hochul, then you don't vote for them, and then the direction changes. The same way in with movies and entertainment. Just don't watch it. And by not watching it, that'll affect their pocketbook and that'll affect their bottom line, and they'll switch course. They will. They did it with Star Wars. They never really did it with WWE because WWE fans are slavish to it. They watch shit just to complain about it. So the company thinks, oh, well, we're on the right track. We give whatever. They'll watch it anyway. They don't care. And this started to happen like around 2010, 2020-ish, 2021-ish, where this kind of messaging turned a corner. I saw it with Saved by the Bell. That's one of the things that ruined the Saved by the Bell remake. Was it was too much politics. It was too much LGBT. Oh, David, you have Disney Plus? Too much LGBT ish stuff. What do you think about Disney Plus, David? Like, do you think it's a good service? You think are you satisfied with it? Because to me, I feel like with their newer content, especially with their Star Wars content, it's not really that good. You know what I mean? And their other animation content, Cruella wasn't a good necessarily a good series that they came out with. That um, a while back. None of their new series. They've tried other new series because it worked for Netflix, but anyway, guys, that's all. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing. Thank you, David. Peace.